Awesome. So it looks like our attendees are evening out. So good afternoon and welcome everyone to AACOMS Navigating AACOMAS for Advisors webinar. My name is Erin Helbling and I serve as the Associate Director of Recruitment and Outreach here at AACOM. We appreciate all of our advising partners for joining us today so that we can provide each of you with updates and tools to better assist you as you guide your students through the 2021-2022 AACOMAS application cycle. It honestly seems like just yesterday we were presenting in April of 2020 for the opening of the current cycle and still getting used to our new normal and virtual environment, so it's good to have you all with us again today. We do have a few housekeeping items before we get started. First, we do expect this webinar to last about an hour, but we've built in some time for questions and answers at the end. Questions can be submitted using the question and answer tool at the bottom of your screen. We ask that you please submit questions using that Q&A feature as opposed to the general chat function, and we will do our best to get all of your questions answered in real time, but priority will be given to those submitted using the Q&A feature. This webinar is also being recorded today, and we do intend to distribute the recording later next week via the Health Prof listserv for anyone who is not able to join today or cares to rewatch at a later date. With that said, I'll kick us off by introducing you to the AACOMAS team. Many of you know Ms. Jamie Bograd, our Director of Application Services, Student Affairs, and Recruitment. I've already introduced myself. And then there's Ms. Jessica James, who's our Associate Director for Application Services and Digital Outreach. And then we're absolutely thrilled to let you know that we've added another staff member to our team, Ms. Maggie Laughlin, who will serve as our admissions coordinator. So if you hear from a Maggie Laughlin at AACOM in the near future, you'll know that she's a part of our team. The work we're doing and sharing and highlighting today within this presentation would not be possible without this team, so I'm grateful to have them here today to help answer your questions on the back end and manage today's webinar. You'll note that on screen we've included both mine and Jamie's contact information, as she and I serve as your point people. So any questions, ideas, concerns, or ways that AACOM can help further assist you can be sent to the two of us. We're grateful today to also have two team members with us from Liaison, and they will guide us through the Universal Advisor portal at the end of today's presentation. We have Mike Margetich, Vice President for CAS Products, and Mike Gilbert, who's the Director of Client Delivery at Liaison. I'll reintroduce and pass the baton to them a little later on today. Without further ado, a quick overview of the order of events for today. We plan to give a quick summary of who we are at AACOM for any new advisors joining us, where our schools are, and then we'll delve right into some important AACOMAS data from the current cycle that we'd like to share with you, as well as important dates and deadlines for our 2021-2022 application cycle. We'll be sure to share a couple of key updates and changes for this cycle that will affect each of you and your students. We'll cover the AACOMAS application and AACOM's continued proactive approach to COVID-19 and a review of our choosio resources. Like I said, I'll then pass the mic off to Mike and Mike, who will demonstrate the Universal Advisor Portal, or the UAP, how to pull reports, and how those pre-run advisor reports have changed for the current cycle as well. And then, like I said, we'll end with a quick Q&A. Who we are. So we are the American Association of Colleges of Osteopathic Medicine, or more fondly known as AACOM. We provide so many services to our 37 member colleges of osteopathic medicine nationwide, but we're probably most well known by our advising colleagues and pre-med students as the team that runs AACOMAS. AACOMAS is the centralized online application service for all U.S. colleges of osteopathic medicine, with the exception of public universities in Texas who use TMDSAS. AACOMAS simplifies the process of applying to osteopathic medical school. So it's a centralized service where your students complete one application and send it with all of the required information to our team, where we then verify your student's application for accuracy, process it, and send it with all relevant materials to the schools that they designate. Currently, they can designate to send their application and materials to one or more of our 37 colleges of osteopathic medicine, offering instruction at 57 locations in 33 states. The map on screen shows where each of our schools are located. And as I mentioned previously, the only programs that don't utilize AACOMAS are the public institutions in Texas who utilize our friends at TMD SAS. Now, I'm excited to share with you some AACOMAS application data from our current cycle. I do want to note and preface all of this data with the fact that this data is changing as we speak, because we are still in the 2020-2021 application cycle. It hasn't closed yet, meaning that this is not final data. It is up to date as of March 15, 2021, but hopefully this will give you an idea of where we are and who our applicant pool is thus far. Beginning with our applicant volume, the data shown, Sorry about that. Beginning with our applicant volume, the data shown on screen compares the current cycle numbers as of 3/15/21 to prior cycle close numbers. You're seeing on the left-hand screen the applicant volume by cycle with steady increases over the years and a significant jump for the current cycle. On the right-hand side of the screen, you're seeing a year-over-year percent change in volume. So as of March 15th, we've seen more than an 18% increase in applicant volume compared to the close of the previous cycle. Application volume. So now what you're seeing on screen is our AACOMAS application volume, or the total number of schools each applicant applies to. What's important to note here is that our application volume is also at a peak with 246,094 submitted applications for this cycle as of 3/15/21. On the right-hand side, on average this year, you're seeing that each applicant has submitted 8.86 applications, which is the highest average number of submitted applications per applicant in the past 6 cycles. Applicant age. Many thought that applicants may have been inspired to become doctors by Dr. Fauci, spurring talk of the Fauci effect and other healthcare heroes, response to the pandemic, economic downturn, etc. If true, our team would assume that these factors and their newly found inspiration would increase our non-traditional applicant pool and in turn increase our average age, or our applicants' average age. However, as you can see on screen, average age remains the same across the past 3 cycles, and there has been no change in mean or median applicant age in the past 3 application cycles. Applicant legal sex by cycle. So now on screen, you're seeing female applicants in red, male applicants in dark blue, and a declined estate in light blue on the bottom. All 3 categories are up, but we are seeing a larger than normal gender gap here compared to previous cycles, with female applicants up 27% versus male applicants who are only up 8.69%. Given the data we've already shown, we know that in general, the applicant pool is up nearly 18%. On screen, you can see a lot of data here, but we'll note that although we're still up year to year, we'll note that although they are still up year to year, Asians and white applicants are tracking lower than the rest of the overall pool. Our Black and African American applicants are up 39% overall, and with Black and African American females up 47% and males only up 22%. So we are again seeing that gender gap discussed on the last slide here as well. Applicant GPA. With no significant change here, this data indicates that our applicants are just as academically qualified in the current cycle as they were in previous cycles, despite seeing a large increase in applicant volume. Applicant MCAT data. Again, even though our applications have increased significantly, it still has not changed the overall competitiveness of our applicant pool. And that's our number one takeaway that we hope you'll take from the GPA and MCAT data, is that although we are seeing a large increase in applicants, they are still just as competitive as ever. Applicant majors. There is an increase in medical related majors, which indicates that these applicants were preparing for medical school prior to, again, being inspired by the pandemic and or Dr. Fauci or the economic downturn, whatever it may be. So we do believe that these students were planning for medical school well in advance. The decrease in non-medicine science majors indicates that applicants were not what we would like to call career changers in this instance. There has been an increase in newly popular majors like public health, and this is a longer term trend and does not explain a sharp increase for the current cycle. Our reapplicant volume, and this is as of December 16th of 2020, was down as a percentage of the total pool. So we had a 0.73% decline in reapplicants since the 2020 cycle. All right, from here, we're going to dive into the upcoming cycle's timeline. As many of you know, but for new advisors that are joining us, AACOMAS opens the first week of May every year for entrance into medical school in fall of the following year. Your students can submit any time after the launch of the cycle. This year, AACOMAS opens for your students to submit on May 4th of 2021. It's important to note that our colleges do not begin receiving and processing applications until mid-June. So with that said, our team continues to maintain that just because the application opens on May 4th, that doesn't mean that your student needs to submit right away. We always suggest that students not rush to submit, but rather submit when ready. We do encourage students to submit by August to ensure that their application is reviewed before priority interview slots are filled. Once schools or our colleges have access to the files in mid-June, they may begin at that time to send their secondary or supplemental applications and invite for interviews at that time. All individual college application deadlines range anywhere from October through April of the following year. However, we can say that most AACOMAS programs maintain deadlines prior to February 1, and our colleges do admit students on a rolling basis. Now, while this is a timeline for your students and something that's super important for them to be aware of, there are some important dates for our advisors specifically that we'd like for you to be aware of. As we've noted, your students can begin submitting applications on May 4th, and then your Universal Advisor Portal accounts, or UAP accounts, will be enabled on June 15th of 2021. Seasoned advisors may remember that 2 years ago, our Council of Osteopathic Medical Admissions Officers decided to move the date that advisors can see decisions within the UAP to January, and we will maintain that again this year. That said, on January 15th of 2022, decisions for the 2021-2022 application cycle will be available to you in the UAP. We ask that you please keep in mind that all decisions made available are the decisions that the individual institution is inputting. If a school does not input a decision, AACOM does not have access to that decision to share it with you. Last but not least, the 2021-2022 cycle is scheduled to close on April 12th of 2022. I know I've mentioned it a couple of times, and new advisors here may be wondering, what is the Universal Advisor Portal? The UAP is a cloud-based platform that provides our health professions advisors with a centralized location to access, query, and report on individuals applying to many health professions programs. To access the UAP, you'll want to begin by navigating to the UAP online. And then we do have our, like I said, we do have our liaison team here who will talk through the functions of the UAP and do a deeper dive into the benefits of the platform. So for now, we just want to reiterate that the UAP is scheduled to begin showing you codes for this upcoming cycle, decision codes that is, for the upcoming cycle on January 15th of 2022. Again, this means that all decision codes shared by the colleges through the AACOMAS platform will display in real time for applicants that have released their information to their pre-health advisors. Like I said, it's important to note that not all of our schools are putting in decision codes in real time. And lastly, it's important to note that you not share these decision codes with your advisees before colleges have communicated any decisions with the students. On screen, we've listed the available AACOMAS decision codes and their definitions for your reference. I'll give you just a second to read over those. Perfect. Now we'll cover two key updates to be aware of for the 2021-2022 AACOMAS application cycle. Beginning with a few changes to the AACOMAS fee waiver program. AACOM has recently revised our AACOMAS fee waiver program for the upcoming cycle. After a thorough review of the AACOMAS fee waiver program, it was determined that more than 60% of our examined awardees had a tax status of independent. However, the HRSA categories indicate that a subset of these applicants may not be truly socioeconomically disadvantaged. The hypothesis, or our hypothesis, is that their tax status and their current educational status qualifies them or would have qualified them for the current year. So with that said, AACOM will be changing the fee waiver program to not distinguish between independent and dependent status for the 2021-2022 application process, meaning that all applicants will have to provide tax documentation for their parents. There are a limited number of exceptions that you can see listed on screen. The exceptions process will be managed directly through the AACOMAS application by our staff in our department. AACOM fee waivers will continue to be provided to eligible applicants on a first come, first served basis, each application cycle. Each fee waiver covers the initial application fee and one designation, and I'll cover those fees on the next slide. So it's important to note that this change is solely for our independent tax status applicants, and there is no change for dependent tax status applicants. To verify eligibility for a fee waiver, students must provide tax documentations for themselves and their parents. Again, parental tax information is required regardless of their age, marital status, or their current tax status. Documentation required includes a filed 2020 federal income tax return, 2021 federal income tax return for Form 1040, 1040A, or 1040 Easy, with an adjusted gross income that falls within the eligibility requirements for the student and their parents. AACOMAS applicants still must apply for a fee waiver before they submit their application, and the fee waiver form is located within the application. Requests received after an application has been submitted cannot and will not be honored. If a student is approved for a fee waiver, they are required to use their waiver within 14 days. That includes holidays and weekends, and extensions will not be granted. So failure to submit an application within that 14-day timeline will void the fee waiver, and the student cannot reapply for a waiver within the same application cycle. If you are aware of the AAMC's fee waiver program, this is a very similar policy to what they have in place. So I mentioned it in the last slide and we haven't covered it yet today, but what does it cost to apply to AACOMAS? The primary application fee for the upcoming cycle is going to be $197, and that covers the primary application and one designation. Every additional designation costs $48. So again, if the student receives a fee waiver and they wish to apply to more than one institution, that student will be responsible for the additional fee of $48 per additional program. I want to add that in addition to covering the initial application fee of $197, AACOM this past year added a benefit to our fee waiver program that will continue into the next cycle, and that's the complimentary access to our big interview platform. Students who receive complimentary access to our big interview platform, it's basically an interview training system. So they can expect to gain a lot of awesome skills from this program, such as anticipating and answering any interview question that may be thrown at them. It gives them some hands-on work in fixing body language or constant or pen tapping, whatever it may be. At the end of using the program, they should come out with a new confidence boost. And it's really that boost that good preparation brings. And then it'll help prepare them with the tools and feedback they need to become really good interviewers really fast. So that's the fee waiver change. The second change that we want you all to be aware of is that for the upcoming cycle, AACOM has signed a master contract with Certified Screening to roll out a centralized criminal background check program for the 2021-2022 application cycle. A few important items to note is that each of our schools has the opportunity to elect to participate in this program, so in the centralized criminal background check program. And so far, on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see a list of the schools who have elected to participate in the program for the 2021-2022 application cycle. The centralized background check program will be triggered upon the first acceptance decision through WebAdmin or offer accepted, and that will only be triggered after February 15th. A couple of other things to note is that AACOM is continuing to recognize that COVID-19 has presented and will continue to present our applicants with unforeseen challenges as they head into their medical school application process. So knowing that, our team will leave the 3 additional optional questions to the application for this cycle. You may remember from last year that we added these questions as additional optional questions to the application, and they will remain for the foreseeable future. Our hope is that your students will continue to use these questions as an opportunity to share with our institutions the obstacles they have faced. Like I said, you're seeing on screen those 3 additional questions today. The first one continues to address whether your institution moved to offering strictly online curriculum, and the second seeks to determine if a student had the opportunity to receive a letter grade for any of their courses during COVID-19. The last and perhaps the most valuable is an essay question asking that students describe how COVID-19 has impacted their pathway to medical school. We've included help text that prompts your students to consider any academic, professional, and/or personal hurdles that COVID-19 presented them. We do believe that it will add value to your students' AACOMAS application to answer the COVID-19 essay question. It truly is their opportunity to highlight how they've dealt with and shown perseverance during the pandemic. Last year, many of you remember, or perhaps you remember, that AACOM, on behalf of our board of deans in our nation's 37 osteopathic medical schools, released a letter to future applicants that detailed the ways in which our institutions would demonstrate flexibility in reviewing applications due to the conditions created by the pandemic. Just yesterday, we released an updated letter to our applicants for the 2021-2022 application cycle. Examples include flexibility in admissions and application processes at some of our institutions, and I've detailed them all on this slide. This also was sent to the NAAHP listserv, so you can find a link to the updated letter on choosio.org. There's also a COVID-19 update highlighted button on choosio.org where you can link directly to the letter for your applicants. I'm not going to read through all of the changes. They are very similar to last year's letter, but there is one bullet point that I'd like to highlight particularly, and that is the very last bullet point on the right-hand side. It reads that most of our schools will continue to require a letter of recommendation from a physician being MD or DO. I would like to note that I hear constantly from both pre-health advisors and pre-med students that they can't or they won't apply to a DO program because they won't or don't have access to a DO to shadow and to get a DO letter of recommendation. So I think there continues to be a misconception that in order to apply to DO programs, you have to have a letter of recommendation from a DO. And I'd like to note that that is simply not the case any longer. Perhaps back in the day it was, but only 2 of our 37 medical schools actually require a DO letter of recommendation. And I want to note importantly that you and your students can sort our institutions based on their letter requirements and many other criteria within the Chooseyoorg Explorer. So you may remember that 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago now, we launched the Chooseyoorg Explorer, which is our online search tool created for prospective students and health professions advisors. I'm actually going to navigate to the Chooseyoorg Explorer at this time simply to show you that you and your students can find specific COVID-19 filterable criteria in the Explorer right now. It's highlighted in yellow here on the screen. And like I said, I'm going to navigate there just to show you the tool in real time. It's completely complimentary access for you and your students. And I know in recent weeks, I've seen a lot of discussion on the NAACP Health Prof listserv, asking about how our institutions will handle virtual interviews for the upcoming cycle, and things such as whether DO institutions are offering virtual interviews, changes to letters of recommendation requirements, and so much more can be found in the Explorer. So what you should be seeing on screen now is choosio.org. And in the top right-hand corner, I've got my mouse hovering over Try the Explorer. So when you hit that, it navigates right to choosio.org/explorer. And you can see all of our institutions pop right up. But what I want to highlight the most is right here, the questions that I've seen the most on the Health Prof listserv. So medical school interview options for 2021-2022 cycle. Your students can come in here and sort our institutions based on whether they are offering virtual interviews only for the upcoming cycle, or whether they have the option to interview virtually or in person. And if it's not available, the institution hasn't made the decision yet. So as soon as we have that decision from the institution, it will be updated within the Explorer. Again, right below that, you can see whether they require a letter from a physician. So whether it's from a DO or an MD. Physician letter not required. There's 16 of our institutions that are not requiring a physician letter for the upcoming cycle, or the 2 that are requiring from a DO specifically. You can click any of this and it will completely sort the institutions based on what they are requiring or not requiring for the upcoming cycle. Great. All right, so last but not least, I wanted to share with you one more exciting resource that we have. And there's a lot of videos now, we've really built up the repertoire, but we recently released a matched celebration video that we hope that you will share with you and your students to celebrate DO's continued success in matching. While the video does have 2020 match data in it, as soon as our final placement data is ready for 2021, the video will be updated.
I choose DO because of the extra breadth of knowledge we received during our 4 years of medical school.
Because my hands are the best tool I have for treating my future patients.
My osteopathic training has prepared me to become a caring and compassionate advocate for my patients.
To not just look at the specific problem that I'm treating my patient for, but to look at the patient as a whole.
Because treating the whole patient, from their psychosocial to their physical health, is how medicine should be practiced.
I choose DO because it allowed me to follow my passion and serve my community. I choose DO because using osteopathic techniques is going to serve special benefit to the population of service members in the military.
I choose DO, and I successfully matched into emergency medicine.
And I successfully matched into ophthalmology.
Internal medicine.
Into general surgery.
I successfully matched into anesthesiology.
I successfully matched into pediatrics.
I successfully matched into emergency medicine.
I choose DO, and I successfully matched into internal medicine.
I successfully matched into obstetrics and gynecology.
I choose DO.
Awesome. All of that, again, can be found on choosio.org, and I'm sure we will be sending some of that out in emails in the coming weeks. Last but not least, I wanted to let you know that we have a couple of upcoming events for you and your students. Again, all of them are free of charge. So next week on April 13th, 2021, we're hosting a Choosio Medical School Expo. And this is simply a virtual event intended for pre-medical students interested in learning more about all of our colleges of osteopathic medicine. It's a great opportunity for them to connect individually with admissions teams at our colleges of medicine. So we certainly encourage you and your students to join us for those events. This event specifically is timed right before the opening of the cycle. So we're hopeful that all of your students can get all of their most pressing questions answered right before we open on May 4th. We will continue to have similar events, as you can see listed on screen after the opening of the cycle. We have one on June 8th, September 14th, and December 8th. We also will be adding our second annual Diversity in Osteopathic Medicine event in collaboration with our partners at Torque for Diversity. And as soon as that's announced, I will send that out. At this time, without further ado, I'd love to pass the baton off to Mike Margetich and Mike Gilbert from Liaison to help guide you through the Universal Advisor Portal. Mike and Mike, thank you both so much for being here today.
Thank you for having us, Erin. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with everybody in the advising community. We're both going to probably be pretty brief as we talk a little bit about the Universal Advisor Portal. It's just a refresher for those of you who have been here before on AACOMS webinars. Let's start here with how you get to the Universal Advisor Portal. You can see right here up on the screen, it's uap.webadmit.org, and your username and password from previous years will get you into the advisor portal for the upcoming year. Once again, that information is made available to you in mid-June. If you have not signed up yet for the Universal Advisor Portal, you can go to the same location, and there is at the very bottom of the page, there is a please click here to create an account. And when you go to that page, you'll be able to create an account, put all of your information in, it'll go to our staff, they'll review it to make sure that you are indeed an advisor, and then they will approve you, and you'll be able to access the system. We have a couple of quick tips and advice about the advisor portal, things that are good refreshers if you've been using it for a while, or if you haven't used the advisor portal before, things that are important to know and understand. The first thing is that the Universal Advisor Portal is a multi-service system. So it will allow you to access and advise your applicants across multiple health professions. It is also multi-cycle, so you don't need to go to a different location to look at your osteopathic medicine applicants from last cycle or from this cycle. You'll be able to see them all in one place. And you can move between those services and cycles through the toggle in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. You'll see it right up there. It'll say AACOMAS 2021 or AACOMAS 2022, and you'll be able to move right between the different application cycles. That's also where you could switch to different services if you're also advising for things like CASPA or FarmCast, for example. You will have access. Oh, can we go back just one? Thanks. You will have access to applicants that have indicated in their AACOMAS application that they apply or that they attended your school and that they answered yes to the advisor release. And starting last year, there was a change in the application that if an applicant had submitted and not said yes to the advisor release, they now have the opportunity to go back and change that answer. So if you have any applicants that are in that situation that submit and then come to you and are looking for advisement, you can have them or ask them to change that. We do have a full help center about the advisor portal. It's available at the URL right here. It's also available from directly within the Universal Advisor portal. And it has some good quick start guides. It has a nice little calendar that kind of gives you a high level overview of all of the different application cycles. So you can see a lot of the dates that Aaron was talking about when decisions are released, for example, and when applicants start appearing at the various colleges of osteopathic medicine. And then it has some videos and quick start guides too, which can help you through some of the tools to look at applicants, to run exports, to create lists to, better look at which applicants are doing what from your school. And finally, we do have a very wonderful support team. Their phone number is right here. It's also in the tool, so it's easy to find. And then Mike Margetich is going to talk a little bit about some of the reports that are available in the advisor portal for you.
Yep, thank you, Mike. And this will be pretty brief because we also talked about this last year. But as Mike mentioned, in addition to all of the resources you have in the portal to go and pull your own data and your own information as you need it, we twice a year for each application cycle, we pre-run a set of reports that summarize all of the statistics and information about each advisor's applicants from their particular undergraduate institution. And so for health professions advisors that are advising applicants who will proceed to apply to AACOMAS, as well as a number of other health professions, when they go into the advisor portal, based on the application services and professions that they have access to, there's a new section we added about a year and a half ago called Advisor Documents. And in there is a link where an advisor can download a pre-run report. We run once in the fall, and then we run it again in the late winter when decisions for the cycle have been finalized. And it has 3 tabs, as you can see here. There is a tab that lists out a detailed roster of all of an advisor's applicants from a particular, from their school, and some summary metrics about them. There's a tab that summarizes the entire applicant pool from an advisor's institution and compares it with the rest of the application service with AACOMAS. And again, I should note that these are all subject to the advisor release. So only students who have released their information through the application to their advisors will appear on these reports. But so the first tab is a roster. The second one is a summary of applicants where they applied, accepted, and were matriculated. And for this year, starting last fall, we added metrics around official test scores. So when applicants have reported official standardized test scores into AACOMAS, you will see those numbers summarized again for each advisor's institution against AACOMAS as a whole. And last but not least, this past year, we added a new tab called All Designations, which essentially will show every one of the colleges of osteopathic medicine and a summary of where an advisor's applicants applied, were accepted, and ultimately matriculated in a nice, easy to use grid. And so these reports are intended for advisors who would prefer a push button summary to the functionality that exists in the portal where they can craft their own data set. So again, these reports were updated with these new tabs I described in the fall. So most advisors have seen them by now. We updated these reports in late February as decisions for the 1920 cycle were finalized. We will run these reports again in this coming fall as preliminary decisions for 2020 to 2021 have been posted. And then we'll run it again in February to finalize those. So these reports are meant for advisors to go in and use at any time. We don't take them down. So advisors can always access them from prior cycles as well. So there is a help center page, as Mike alluded to, that refers to how these reports work, what rules are in play on each report, and what goes into them. And so we encourage everyone to check that out. And I think from our side, that's all we've got for the Universal Advisor Portal. Thank you, guys.
Hey, Mike, while I have you, I have a question. Do these UAP, from an advisor, do these UAP reports include all applicants who have included our institution, or just those who designate our school as their primary?
That's a good, yeah, it's a good question. It is limited to primary college. So all the rules that go into running these reports, from the release statement to the use of primary college, are covered in the Help Center. But yes, it will filter down on primary colleges.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. I'm just checking to see if we have any other specific questions for you.
And just, by the way, just to pick up on that last point, if for particular cases where an advisor knows that they have students who would not have listed their school as a primary, so for example, post-bac programs and things that advisors might be managing students through, the data is always available in the portal itself. So those applicants are never hidden from you. It's simply that the pre-run reports, because of the majority of folks' needs there, are filtered down on primary college. But the Universal Advisor Portal does contain everything. So if you need data for applicants that you're not seeing on there, it's always in the portal itself for you.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. I think on our next screen, I've got the AACOMAS customer support, and I want to note, looks like it's not moving. There we go. I want to note that there are two separate help centers and contact teams to customer service teams to contact, really. One for your applicants and one specifically designed for you, the advisor. So if you'd like to screenshot these phone numbers and emails specifically, and then we talked a lot about the help center just now, which you can access directly in the UAP. You also can simply Google AACOMAS Applicant Help Center for your students, and it comes right up. I think that's pretty easy to find. So with that, I'll turn it over for questions. I know we've covered a lot of information today. We're happy to take any questions you may have. Again, you can continue to submit those questions in the Q&A box on the bottom of your screen. Jamie and Jessica, are there any questions we need to answer live, or should? I know you guys have been doing an awesome job on the back end, hoping answering those questions.
There was a question about the UAP portal screen that Mike had up that they couldn't see. Do you want to put that back up, Mike?
We can certainly do that. Can you go back just a couple, Erin, until we find the screen that they're talking about?
Yes, and I think it may have been, we may not have shown it. I think it was during, if I'm not mistaken, it was during Mike Margutich's slide when he was talking about the different tabs where you can find the data and the reports within the UAP. I just gave Mike Gilbert, I made you co-host. I can stop sharing if you'd like to share it live, maybe. So the aggregate tab, the standardized test section, I think that's, if I'm not mistaken, I think that's what they're looking for.
Okay, it'll take me a moment to pull it up. I don't know if you want to go on to a different question in the meantime.
Absolutely.
And then did you already answer the question, or is that what you're pulling at? The advisor wanted to know if they could get all applicant data regardless of whether they release their AACOMAS specific application. So if they had 50 students at their institution, but only 30 released, will they get information about the 20 students without identifying information about whether or not they matriculated at the institution? That question is for Mike and Mike.
Yeah, I think Mike was able to answer that. The reports that are the pre-built reports, the ones that I'm looking to pull up right now, those reports do not include applicants that have not indicated you as a primary. So they are only for folks that attended you as a primary institution. However, that data is all available to you in the Universal Advisor portal, so that you can always get there to it.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, I was on mute. Sorry for missing that question, but yeah, that's correct. And again, I definitely refer folks to the page in the Help Center because it does go through every one of the rules that filter those pre-run reports down. It's a really good resource.
All right, I'm going to try and share my screen here, which is our Help Center for the aggregate reports. And so hopefully you will get that and not my calendar, or one of those weird things where we all see pictures of each other over and over again. So are we seeing the report?
It looks perfect.
Outstanding. All right, and what was the question related to it?
So I believe the question was, as Mike Margotich was going over the aggregate tabs and where they find those within the UAP, he was kind of explaining it. And I believe the advisors that submitted the questions were just noting that they couldn't see those tabs. And we're curious where to find them within their own account.
So if we go up here a little bit.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Thanks.
It's right on the left-hand side of your Universal Advisor portal under Reports and Exports, and it's called Advisor Documents.
Perfect. I believe that answers the question, but if not, hopefully the advisor who asked will ask a follow-up. Perfect. So as far as I can see, Jamie or Jessica, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that that covers the majority of the questions that I'm seeing on my end, but please let me know if I'm mistaken.
I think there are a few questions. I can certainly ask them and try to respond. One of the questions was, have the DO schools who continue to require letters from MDs and DOs in this cycle provided any justification as to why? For many students, COVID has prevented them from shadowing in person, making finding a physician who is willing to write a letter of recommendation harder and harder to find. And to be very honest, we can certainly ask our schools to provide further justification. We know that many of them really want students that are going to commit to 7+ years of medical school and residency to know and have experienced working with a physician, or at least understand the complexities that go along with being a physician. So that's why it's still important that they want to see that experience or that exposure to physicians. And that's really the responses we've gotten from our schools so far. But we can certainly, we have a meeting with all of our admissions officers actually for the rest of the week. We have our annual conference with them. This is something we can explore with them and provide you feedback. I know that there's been a couple of private conversations with advisors that I've had on this chat that said it's increasingly difficult for their students to get letters of recommendation from physicians. And so it's something I can absolutely address with them when I meet with them, you know, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and get back to you. But that is their policy or their process that they've agreed to at this point. We also have to acknowledge that, yes, it was difficult for these students to get these letters this year from March to now, but we would hope, and we hope that you have advised your students that this isn't the first year that they should have been reaching out to a physician to shadow. You know, they really should have been doing this for the last several years or couple years if they knew that they were you know, aspiring to be a physician. So again, I can get back to you all on that and try to provide you with, you know, a more comprehensive response, but that's where I am right now. Then if anyone else wants to answer the questions while I search for more questions, certainly can do that.
Sure. So one question that I saw just come in is, for the increase in applicants this cycle, are we getting feedback from schools that our applicants are less qualified in years past? It's interesting that the average mean is the same and the metrics seem to be about the same for past cycles. So we did show you the data today, and Jamie, feel free to jump in. Jessica, obviously feel free to jump in as well, that our applicant pool is just as competitive as it's been in previous cycles. I don't know, Jamie, if you've had specific feedback from individual institutions in terms of the competitiveness of their specific pools.
Yeah, I actually just got off the phone with the school earlier this morning, and just as Aaron described, you know, our overall applicants remain you know, as competitive as they were in previous years. And the school mentioned that their specific candidates are more competitive this year than they have in the past. So we're not seeing that these applicants are less qualified to become physicians. So I believe this year will be more applicants that are qualified that don't get into schools than in years before.
Awesome. Next question. I also can echo that, having heard that from some of our institutions as well. Any data on match rates between DO and NV programs? So I know I played the match celebration video, which showed you that in 2020, we had 99.29% of our graduates, our seniors, matched successfully or placed successfully into a residency program. We have original or preliminary NRMP data, but there are obviously still placements happening from now until early June. So we will have final data, but the NRMP has released all the data in terms of how DOs and MDs fared in the match. So we will have to wait until June for our final match or placement rates.
And Aaron, you know those percentages off the top of your head, what the US seniors initial match rates are, or?
I can certainly pull them in the next few minutes. I believe that I don't want to misspeak. So let me pull it right up. If there's another question we can.
Sure. Someone said match first place is different. Can you elaborate on the data for matching versus placing? Matching is what happens during the week-long process to be matched to a residency program. So you either get your first match or you go into the SOAP, which allows you to match later on during the week. And then the final matches are on Friday. If you have not matched during match week, then you also can continue to search for residency positions afterwards. And that's what we'll call placements. So you're placed, you didn't match during the week, but you place into a residency slot later on until July 1st when residency officially begins.
And that's the same for MDs and DOs. And I can share, I'm going to share my screen again. So what I've pulled here is the initial NRMP data. So you can see how they've broken it down by USMD seniors and USDO seniors. And the percent of USMD seniors matched to PGY 1 positions was 92.8%, which was down 0.9%, and percent of USDO seniors which matched into PGY 1 positions was 89.1, which was also down 1.6%. And just reading through some of these questions. Let's get that live. All right.
we'll be here. We can stay on for the next, few minutes if there are more questions. I'm trying to answer some of the questions too, but we'll stay on for a few if you'd like to stay on, and if not, we appreciate you guys coming. And Erin, thanks for the terrific presentation. Can you remind them where they could find it or how they'll get access to the presentation after?
Yep, 100%. Yeah, and I'd like to obviously thank Mike and Mike for joining us so much. We really appreciate your insight and your time in this virtual world. I know we all spend a lot of time on Zoom, so I value you joining us. In terms of being able to find this presentation at a later date, we will submit it to the NAAHP Health Prof and send it to our own listserv internally as well. So that's where you can be on the lookout for that information. If at any point you have any questions whatsoever for our team, we can drop in the chat our Choosio email and or mine or Jamie's email. We're always happy to answer any questions throughout the year. So thank you to all of those who have joined us. Like Jamie said, we will remain online for just a few minutes to answer any last minute questions that you might have. And thank you again for your time, and best of luck to you and your students as you embark on another virtual application cycle.